In the year 2000, the founders of Netflix walked into a meeting with a simple goal: save their company. Netflix was losing money. Investors were nervous. The future looked uncertain, so they made an offer. For $50 million, Blockbuster could buy Netflix. The meeting ended without a deal. 20 years later, Netflix would be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Blockbuster would be bankrupt. Most people think this story is about streaming. It isn't. Because streaming wasn't the reason Netflix won, and Blockbuster didn't lose because its executives were stupid. The real reason is much more interesting. Blockbuster fell into a trap that has destroyed some of the biggest companies in history: Kodak, Nokia, BlackBerry, Sears. And the strange thing is, the trap only appears after you've become successful. To understand why Netflix won, we first need to understand why Blockbuster seemed unbeatable. Today, it's easy to forget just how dominant Blockbuster was. At its peak, the company operated more than 9,000 stores worldwide. Millions of people visited every week. Revenue climbed into the billions. For many families, a trip to Blockbuster wasn't just shopping. It was an event. Friday night meant walking through endless rows of movies, arguing over what to watch, hoping the newest release wasn't already rented out. Blockbuster wasn't just winning, it had become part of everyday life. And that's exactly what made it vulnerable. The greatest danger to a successful company isn't competition, it's confidence. When something works for long enough, you start believing it will always work. You stop questioning assumptions, you stop imagining alternatives, and eventually, you stop seeing change. Blockbuster's first blind spot was hiding in plain sight: late fees. Customers hated them, absolutely hated them. Returning a movie late could cost nearly as much as renting it. People complained constantly, but Blockbuster couldn't simply eliminate them. Why? Because late fees generated hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Think about the position that put the company in. Customers wanted late fees gone. Blockbuster needed them to stay. The business had become dependent on something people actively disliked. And that's where Netflix found its opening. Most companies ask, what do customers want? Netflix asked something different. What do customers hate? The answer was obvious. Driving to the store, discovering the movie you wanted was out of stock, rushing back before the return deadline, paying late fees. The entire experience was filled with friction, and Netflix became obsessed with removing it. But here's where the story gets strange. Because Netflix wasn't trying to build a better Blockbuster. It was trying to eliminate the need for Blockbuster entirely. When Netflix launched in 1997, its idea sounded ridiculous. Customers would order DVDs online, then receive them through the mail. That's it. No stores, no shelves, no late fees, no driving, no lines. Today, that sounds completely normal. Back then, it sounded insane. The internet was still young. Online shopping barely existed. Most people couldn't imagine renting movies without visiting a store, but history's most successful disruptors rarely win by doing the same thing better. They win by changing the game entirely. At first, Netflix struggled. Growth was slow. Profitability seemed distant. Then the dot-com crash arrived. Technology companies collapsed everywhere. Money dried up. Investors panicked. And Netflix suddenly found itself fighting for survival. Which brings us to one of the most famous moments in business history. Netflix approached Blockbuster. The offer was simple: buy us. The asking price was roughly $50 million. Today, that number sounds absurd. At the time, it wasn't. Netflix wasn't the giant we know today. It was a struggling startup. People love to imagine Blockbuster executives laughing Netflix out of the room. Reality is less dramatic and far more important. Blockbuster didn't reject Netflix because it was arrogant. It rejected Netflix because Netflix looked small. DVD by mail looked small. The internet looked small. The future always looks small at first. That's what makes it so easy to ignore. Blockbuster looked at Netflix and saw a niche DVD company. Netflix looked at itself and saw the future of entertainment. One company saw what existed. The other saw what was coming. That difference changed everything. Over the next several years, Netflix became obsessed with the question: what happens when movies no longer need DVDs? At the time, most people weren't asking that question. Internet speeds were still limited. Streaming seemed far away. But Netflix understood something important. People didn't want DVDs. They wanted entertainment. The DVD was just the delivery method, and delivery methods change. Nobody misses renting VHS tapes. Nobody misses rewinding them. People simply want the easiest possible experience. And Netflix recognized that before most of the industry did. While Netflix was preparing for the future, Blockbuster was busy protecting the past. This is where the real trap appears. Success creates commitments. Blockbuster had thousands of stores, thousands of employees, long-term leases, inventory systems, management structures. All of those things made sense when stores were the future, but they became liabilities when stores stopped being the future. Netflix had no empire to defend. Blockbuster had an entire empire, and empires are notoriously difficult to change. Imagine steering a speedboat. Now imagine steering an aircraft carrier. Both can change direction. One simply does it much faster. At this point, it looks like Netflix had all the answers. It didn't. In 2007, Netflix made its most important decision. It launched streaming. Today, people often view this as an obvious move. It wasn't. Streaming threatened Netflix's own DVD business. The DVDs were still making money. Customers still used them. Wall Street wasn't convinced. Yet Netflix moved forward anyway. Why? Because the company understood a principle many businesses struggle to accept. If you don't disrupt yourself, somebody else eventually will. Netflix was willing to sacrifice today's success to secure tomorrow's success. Most companies aren't, and that's often why they lose. Then Netflix made another move that looked equally dangerous. Original content. Billions of dollars would be spent producing shows and movies. To many observers, it seemed reckless. Why not simply license content from existing studios? Because Netflix saw another dangerous dependency. If someone else owns your content, they control your future. Netflix didn't want to rent its future. It wanted to own it. That decision eventually produced shows like House of Cards, Stranger Things, and dozens of other hits. Netflix wasn't just distributing entertainment anymore, it was becoming an entertainment company itself. Meanwhile, Blockbuster's decline accelerated. Stores closed, customers disappeared, revenue collapsed, and in 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. A company that once dominated an entire industry was gone, not because it lacked resources, not because it lacked customers, not because it lacked talent, because it failed to adapt. And that's why this story still matters. The story of Netflix isn't really about movies. It's about how success changes the way people think. Blockbuster's greatest strength became its greatest weakness. The business model that made it powerful also made it resistant to change. Netflix won because it never stopped questioning its assumptions. It never became too attached to the way things were. And that's the lesson hidden beneath this entire story. The biggest threat to your future is often your current success. Blockbuster spent years protecting the business model that made it successful. Netflix spent years preparing for the business model that would replace it. One company defended the present, the other built the future, and that's why Netflix won. The strange thing is, every dominant company believes it won't become the next Blockbuster. But Blockbuster believed that too.